if you're a musician, or if you've been to like a show or a concert or something, you've been around sound systems, like you give us talk into a microphone, and you experience that feedback, the feedback firing. So what happens is the sound goes into the microphone, it goes into the speaker, it feeds back into the microphone, and that's the loop. And then that ringing sound starts, and it gets louder and louder as the feedback loop continues, as the waves go through, the sound waves go through that cycle, microphone, speaker, microphone, speaker, microphone, speaker, and then they get bigger and bigger and louder and louder. It's the same thing with the head, in that the head is that feedback loop of self-centeredness. It's like they say in recovery, you're not much, but you're all you think about. You're all you think about. Now, in this view, it's not you who's doing the self-centered feedback loop. It's the head. And the head is just constantly self-referencing. It's constantly looking at itself in reference to the outer world. So there's a perceived subject being that mental movement, and then object, everything else. And then because of that relationship of the 1-2, or the two-ness, let's say, it's constantly then self-referencing its experience. It's self-centered all the time. Now with anxiety or depression or something, the self-centeredness is like on steroids. So the feedback loop gets really, really loud because all it's doing is thinking about itself. So it's like, well, the environment that I'm in makes me really anxious. But the environment in reference to what? The self, the you that you're taking yourself to be, or living as the head. That's really what's making you anxious, is taking yourself to be the feedback loop. And then when you take yourself to be the head, to be the feedback loop goes, whoa, 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 it goes a lot faster because we're putting power into the head, into the self-centeredness. Again, you're not doing the self-centeredness. You're not doing the process of thought. You're what's listening to it. So for somebody to be like, you're self-centered, it's like, well, the head is self-centered. The head is like living in this orbit of it's thinking and referencing everything else to its relationship to itself. Now, really, that selfness doesn't exist. What it's referencing is the body as mine, yeah, and then the environment and my relationship with it as that perceived self, which is just an idea. There is no self, but the idea that I am the thoughts and I am the body. Then the anxiety comes up, and then the anxious thoughts happen, which are referencing now I'm getting an anxious thought as the body and the mind, and then when I feed that, it goes off. Same thing, depression, but depression goes the other way. Yeah? Now, depression is still a feedback loop, so there's still that rate of thought referencing thought, always referencing me. It's just that it feels like you're dropping down rather than anxiety ramping you up. Either way, it's coming out of the self-centered system. The self-centeredness is not inherently bad. There's not really a good or bad here. We're just looking at what is. So the head is always going to be referencing the self. It's going to come in contact with things through the senses, and then the head is going to claim that contact to suggest that there's a you who's in contact. Now that's the part that's really hooking you in, is suggesting that there's a you who's in contact. So there's seeing with these eyes, there's an object that's suggesting there's a movement of the mind which is labeling the contact, and that's suggesting that there's a me. That's the feedback loop. Now if I take that to be me and I'm living as that thought, I'm feeding it, and now that's going to just generate more, same as the mic and the speaker. And then you can see it in your experience. If you've had anxiety or had like repetitive depressive moments or movements, let's say, you can see it happen. It's all self-focused, and then the self-focusing gets so loud that it goes one way or the other. Yeah, it's either like going up to hyper anxiety or it's dripping down to depression. Because the feedback loop of the self-referencing can be like, I'm nervous, I'm scared, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do, I'm getting barraged by thoughts, and I'm buying those thoughts as mine, and I'm getting anxious. Or in my experience, the other dive is, I'm a piece of shit, everything's my fault, I'm not worth it. You see the the powerful part of the sentence is I'm, me, I, my problem, my. It's all self-referencing. It's all self-referencing. So it's really important that we look at, well, what is that self that's getting referenced? Is that actually there? Because it's not. There's not a hub to the wheel. There's a bunch of action happening. It's not happening to you because there is nothing there. It's just action. What you could consider yourself as is beingness. I really don't know how else to explain it. I don't. It's like awareness of space, open space, open space. So then when the self-referencing thought comes in, you see that happen. But as the beingness, you're not buying it. So the feedback loop doesn't happen. You see? There's still a speaker, like a sound speaker, but you've taken the microphone away. Yeah, the microphone is the idea that you are the self, that there's a hub of the wheel. So you take the microphone away, the speaker just works. It's fine. Music plays. Great. Life happens. But you take away the self-reference. You don't take away the self-referencing mind, because that's always going to be happening, self-referencing and self-centering the mind. But you take away the buying of it. Yeah, you see it for what it is, and you know it's not inherently you. You're not initiating the self-centeredness. Self-centeredness is just the program of the head. And in a way, we need that self-centeredness to survive in the world, to go to work and to do all these things. But you can really see how the self-centeredness gets hyped up and creates a lot of problems. And then everything is seen through that self-centered point of view from the head, from the head. Now you're not the head, but this is what the head's doing. It's seeing everything from a self-centered point of view. Even to the point where you could hear somebody say, "Well, I've been in public service for 30 years. I've spent my life serving others." Yes? So from the top layer of that idea, that person has been doing service for others. But behind that, it's interesting that the head would do that. I've spent my career in service to others. Yes, but it's also served you in many ways, the head, not you, but it served the head and the body. Because in being in service to others, you've made $50,000, $60,000 every year. And then you walk around being the one who's been in service. Now that is bondage of self again. The self-centeredness, that self-centered feedback cycle is the bondage of self. If you're living as that cycle, you're bonded to the self-centeredness of the head. You're bonded to the head and the body. You see, so then you're living from that point of view of other and this. Now that's why for many of us life seems to be full of fear. Because there's this and there's other. And the head is constantly referencing this is relationship to that. And there's a fear dynamic there, which is going to make it anxious again. Because the self-referencing mind is looking at the past and worrying about the future. It's very rarely, if ever, referencing what's actually happening. You see, when you go to bed at night, when you lay down in bed, how many thoughts does it take for you to lay in bed? None, really. But how often, for many of us, we lay in bed and then the mind takes off. It's not thinking about what's happening. It's not. It's self-centered thought on the past or the future, what's to come. I'm thinking about what I did wrong, depression. I'm worried about what's happening in the future, anxiety. You see? And it's all coming back to referencing itself. Yeah. It's such a loop. It's such a tricky loop in a way that we get caught in. But it's seeing that you're not the self-centeredness. That is that you get that release from bondage, the relief from the bondage of self. And then you can let the process happen, the program happen. Because it is a program, so it's going to keep programming that way. But I really feel that if we're constantly referencing the outer as the cause of our depression and the cause of the anxiety, we're never going to see the actual problem, which is living as the self-centered system. Because in my experience, depression is a just hyper self-centeredness. I mean, alcoholism, as we know from recovery, is essentially just a hyper self-centeredness. Everything is referencing the self, and the self can't get away from the discomfort of constantly referencing itself. So then it goes to drink, or it goes somewhere else, drugs, sex, porn, whatever it's going to grab onto, you see? Because the self-centeredness is inherently quite uncomfortable for many of us. So in my experience, that deep depression is a hyper self-centered loop. Everything is coming back to it, coming back to the head, the body. It's my fault. I'm the one who's doing this. I'm hurting. It's all me, me, me. And it's super claustrophobic, like you're really closed in on it. You're not, but the head is really closed in on it. And to the point where the body will start to shut down. Like I used to get super cold. I had to put on all kinds of clothes and then sleep for like 16 hours and then try to get up. Now, the release from that cycle is a release from the self-centered system. Yeah, to see you're not it, even just for a pause. Saint Francis of Assisi, what was his? Comfort rather than to be comforted, understand rather than be understood, love rather than to be is by self. It is by self-forgetting that one finds. Now, here's the kicker: the head being a self-centered movement. How is that going to self? How is that going to forget itself? It's not going to be able to do it. Because you see, the self, the mental movement is only suggesting that there's a self, that there's a you, that there's a hub to the wheel of the happening. It's only a suggestion. It doesn't actually exist. So the thought system is a bunch of movements happening, and it has to keep referencing itself in order to keep recreating itself, because it doesn't really exist. It's just a repetition of thought all the time that I'm listening to and taking to be me. So when he says it's by self-forgetting that one finds, as the head, you're not going to be able to get out of the head. Self is not going to be able to get out of self. Self-centeredness is only focused on self-centeredness. So it's by self-forgetting that one finds. It's by seeing that you're not the system of self-centeredness that one finds. And what do they find? That's for you to find out. Because putting words on the infinite is just pretty useless, really. It's by self-forgetting. But you're not forgetting about the mental system as the mental system. You're seeing that you're not the system. It's by self-forgetting that one finds, and then it's by forgiving that one is forgiven. Now, here's the other part when it comes into forgiveness. Now, if you're living as a self-centered system, which is constantly referencing the mind and the body, and constantly referencing what that mind and body has been through and has done, then do we really believe that that mental system is going to be able to forgive the other and forgive itself for what it's done? In my experience, no. It can go to a million forgiveness workshops and it can say, I forgive you and I forgive you, but it's going to hold on. And the reason that the head is holding on to what's going on is because it's that self-centeredness. You see? It has to hold on to what others have done and to what I've perceivingly have done, because that's how it exists. That's how it's dualistic. That's subject object. So if somebody has done something to me, like I was sexually abused when I was a kid, so if somebody did that to me, to the head and the body, what I'm taking myself to be me, that's not me, but it's what many of us live as. Yes? How is that system going to be able to forgive that person? And then even on top of that, how is that self-centered system going to be able to forgive itself? When it's stuck in the story of the two, it's not going to be able to do it. Yes? So it's by seeing that you're not the system. And how do you see that you're not the system? You're not initiating the feedback loop that's happening. And if you really look at it, you'll see that you're not initiating those thoughts. When you lay down in bed at night, you don't need any thought to just lay there and experience life. But there's all kinds of thoughts firing. So what's doing that? It's the program of the head. It's not beingness. It's not awareness doing that. Awareness is pure, open, settled all the time, still. So it's by self-forgetting one finds, and then by seeing that you're not the self-centered system, oh, now there's a lot of power to forgive. Because if I'm not the self-centered system, the person who sexually abused me is not the self-centered system. Yeah, their beingness is not the self-centered system. The body and the mind did what it did, and there's repercussions for what it did, but inherently the being is not the body and the mind. So I can forgive the being because the being was under the same spell of self-centeredness that I've lived under my life. You see that movement? It's by seeing that you're not it that you see that everybody else is not it. When you see everybody else is not it, oh, well, then what was going on was the head, the program of the head, is self-centered, and it's referencing the world in that self-centered view. And stuff happened to this body and mind, so it's going to react out of fear a lot of its life. Okay, well, I can forgive that because it wasn't inherently me doing it. I'm not the doer of that. Well, if I'm not the doer, then they're not the doer inherently. So now we can really start to let go of stuff. But if I'm living as the head, yeah, as the self, it's going to be really, really hard. It's going to be impossible, in my opinion, for that system to forgive itself and then to see reality clearly in others. To look at others and to know that they're not just a body and mind. They might be living as a body and mind, but that doesn't change the fact. Yeah. And then in advaita, they say we don't get free as self, but you get free from self. Because you see, in advaita, in the Indian system, they know that the program of self-centeredness isn't really going to shift that much. It's always going, you can change the program in parts of the body and the mind, of course, but the base root of self-centeredness, you're not going to change because it's based on duality. And the mind, the small m mind, is a dualistic system. It's me and other. And as long as there's that subject-object relationship, the head is always going to reify the subjectiveness. Now, the head is suggesting, as we said before, that the subject is a J. That suggestion is false. That's the false suggestion. If you sit down and you look for J, yeah, who do thoughts arise to? They arise to me. Who am I? Where is that I in your body? You're not going to find it because there's no hub to the wheel. It's just a bunch of action that you're not doing. You're the awareness, the beingness, the still space that all that action is happening in. That's like a wild amount of relief. And it does not take very much time to see that because it's what you are. It's by hearing this message, yeah, Advaita, Vedanta, Zen, Chan, whatever, you hear the message through. Yeah, hear that message of not to. Of not to. Because the head, the self-centered system, is going to keep referencing subject in relation to object. And that's going to make things really unsteady, anxiety, depression. And then as soon as there's a little bit of anxiety, the head is going, oh, I'm anxious. That's the voice. Oh no, I'm anxious. Okay, so that's the head doing that. I'm anxious. But something is aware of that movement saying, I'm anxious. You're not saying, I'm anxious, nor are you anxious. The head and the body are anxious. And usually they're only anxious for 2 or 3 seconds. But if I listen to the I'm anxious and go, oh, I am anxious, me, I am now anxiety, well, then I'm feeding the story, and now anxiety goes on for 20, 30 years. So why don't we just cut the head off it right away and see that there's no hub to the anxiety movement, nor am I initiating the thought. It's a program that's happening. Because as soon as I listen to that program, okay, now there's a J. Who is J? Body. What is body separate from? Everything else, because the senses are telling me, ooh, I'm separate from everything else. Yeah, now you're in two-ness. Fear. Yeah. Now false evidence becomes real, appears real. Fear. False evidence appears real. To what? To the self-centered system. What's the self-centered system suggesting? That there's a me at the hub of the wheel of experience. Is that true? The reality is no. The reality is that there's a beingness. I don't even like talking about it too much because it's just words. Words are going to, they just take infinite divinity and they put it into another label and form. And it just makes everything it makes like the head's trying to understand it. This is the other thing, is the head, being that self-centered system, is trying to figure out non-duality. It's never going to figure it out. It's never going to figure it out because it's dualistic. And so it's not going to see not two-ness from two-ness. You see that you're not the two-ness, and then there's not two-ness. So when people are listening to these things and they're going, I don't understand. No, the head doesn't understand. The system that you're living as doesn't understand. What you are is full of knowledge, as is. Not head knowledge, but just direct experience, knowing all the time. All the time. So I don't understand. Yeah. What doesn't understand is not you. That's the self-center we're talking about. You see? As soon as something comes in, it goes me. How does that reference me? Me, I. The head is always trying to like take that. How does that affect me? Where am I? What? And then it's constantly doing that over and over again. If we look at it like that, it's very obvious where anxiety comes from. It comes from the ownership of that movement. And then as soon as I own it, it goes to the feedback loop really loud. So I don't really feel like we have to worry about self-centeredness. You just have to see that it's not you who's doing the self-centeredness. And then you live from a perspective of not self-centeredness. The head is living from self-centeredness. but you're just here, chilled out. Yeah, much more open, much more present, because the self-centeredness is always referencing past or future, never happening right now. That's another way to see it when you're just moving through life. Yeah, and it's like a little pump of something comes up in the head. Is that pump, is that movement of the mental process referencing what's actually happening? Because I'm literally just sitting in a chair. I don't really need any thought here. And so why am I anxious about 2 months from now? And why am I killing myself about something that happened 20 years ago? I'm not doing that. You're not doing that. That's the head. See that. And then you'll see that you're not firing that. You'll see the program happening. Yeah. And you'll know that you're not that program. Relief. The more that we do that, the more the reliance on the program diminishes. Self-reliance avails us nothing. We know that from recovery. Or self-knowledge avails us nothing. Self-reliance has failed us. Because as self-reliance, we're seeing out of the eyes of fear. And then it's going to be depression or anxiety. Or something in between. Some sort of discomfort is going to lead from that. So rather than trying to alter self-centeredness, which is never going to happen because the head's working in a dualistic way, see that you're not it, and then work back from there. If there's still a bunch of stuff happening in the mental system, work from it from that point of view. At least you know you're not it, so you can be honest about it. Because the self-centeredness isn't going to be able to get out of the self-centeredness, and the self-centeredness is not going to really look at the self-centeredness even as an issue, because you're living as it. All the faith is put into that. So it's a movement of that faith into something much greater than just that movement. So life goes from, rather than being self-centered and claustrophobic, it begins to open up wide, wide. You're right here. Yeah, you're right here. It goes much more to we than me. We, not just people, but the environment.